Edwin here again with more Tuesday tips for leaders of volunteers. It is March, which is Women's History Month, or Her Story Month. In this week's Tuesday tips, I want to cover a brief history of the critical role of women throughout the nonprofit and volunteering and philanthropic sectors for the last couple of hundred years, and where we are today, and what is some of the data telling us about how women are still present in nonprofit, in what percentages, and what percentages of leadership roles we tend to hold, and pay discrepancies, and really the tips, the practical takeaways today, other than a Her Story lesson, is about how to fix some of these disparities and who can help with that effort. Quick review of the last couple of hundred years. Women started to be much more active in founding and participating in voluntary efforts, charitable efforts, philanthropy around the 1800s. Previous to that, men had full control, financial, social power over those institutions, but really, along with the volunteerism that went into the suffragette movement for women gaining the right to vote in the United States and most other countries, that effort started in the 1800s and culminated in the early 20th century, a little bit later, unfortunately, in other parts of the world for the right to vote. But all of that politically progressive movement was very heavily worked on by women, not just for their own rights, but also in abolition and a lot of the issues of the times, and carrying forward to today. A lot of our community service work are people who are female identified. Most research and statistics that have come out in the last 10 years haven't changed much, so about 73% to 2/3-ish of the employees in any nonprofit or non-government organization doing community service work are women. Unfortunately, another statistic, and this comes from Guidestar a few years ago, is that only 18% of CEOs of large nonprofits, with those nonprofits with a budget of $50 million a year or more, only 18% of those nonprofit CEOs are women. So we're doing a lot of the entry-level and middle management work, and we're not always at the table to be making major decisions about the organization. This is particularly true of leaders of volunteers. This gender disparity carries across the board. There's another barrier for power and decision making where leaders of volunteers are rarely positioned in the organization at a leadership team level or director level. Usually are, coordinator, middle manager level most of the time. Now, some other statistics that have been really interesting coming out of the last couple of years of the pandemic and switching from meetings in the room to meetings on the Zoom. So a report and survey from a company called Catalyst that came out very recently states that women speak 25% less in Zoom meetings than their male counterparts, and a larger business survey showed that 45% of women, and this was just in June of last year, of 2021, don't speak up in meetings, and about 1 in 5 women said that they're actually completely ignored on Zoom calls. And this has translated, I've experienced some of this directly. My friends and family who are in, high vice president or CEO, close to CEO levels, it can still be dismissed as, not being experienced and knowledgeable just because of that gender perception. So we have a long way to go. We've come a long way, and it's really up to everyone in the organization, even if it's majority of employees or volunteers are women. It's really up to everybody, and particularly male allies, to work and to change the system rather than expect women individually themselves to have to do all of the work and all of the emotional labor and spend all of that energy fighting to be heard. It's great if you're a personality like mine that's very direct and extroverted. I'm completely comfortable saying it's my turn to talk. I'm also really mindful of when it's someone else's turn to take focus and take the spotlight, and I've talked about that in other Tuesday tips. But it really falls on everyone in the organization of all across the gender spectrum to work on that inequity, in addition to hopefully the work that the organization is doing around racial inequities or age discrimination or sexuality discrimination as well. Particularly, I'm calling on putting the spotlight on male allies to step up and do the work. Call out male colleagues who are interrupting or dismissing or being rude or disrespectful to female colleagues in the same meeting, whether that's on the Zoom or in the room. If you're a facilitator in a meeting of any gender, be really careful to call on people equally and not let a particular voice, but it's more likely to be a male voice, dominate a conversation. Now, plenty of organizations have almost entirely women on the staff and volunteer pool. That's great. You're going to have less of this issue, but even with men as a minority as employees in the nonprofit sector, again, there can still be an imbalance in meetings with community partners and other organizations. So let's all celebrate Women's History and Her Story Month by listening and learning with each other, to each other, and work on improving gender parity systems in our organizations. I really hope you enjoy all of these Tuesday Tips videos. I love to create these for all of you. And if you have any wisdom to share, please get in touch with me. I love to feature a huge variety of voices. And we'll see you next week.